So today we're going to be talking about a crypto mining ETF called DIGA from Cosmos Asset Management. Now, if you've seen recently, we've been getting bombarded with crypto ETFs. First we saw ETF securities coming out with ASX FTEC. Then we saw beta shares coming out with ASX CRYP, and then now we have DIGA. If you guys are new here, my name is Fyzee. This channel is about finance and investing. Before we begin, as usual, this video is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Let's jump into it. So DIGA is the Cosmos Global Digital Miners Access ETF. Now, if you're like me, until recently, you probably had no idea that this Cosmos company even existed. Because usually when it comes to these new innovative ETFs and these new kind of thematic ETFs, we hear about beta shares and usually ETF securities that kind of steps in as well. But this Cosmos company seems to be quite new to this, which is pretty good to see. Now, as you can see, what makes Cosmos really special is the fact that their main focus is the digital asset space. They're not trying to compete with the likes of BlackRock or Vanguard, as based on what I can see. They're trying to carve out their little own niche in the whole crypto and digital community, and they're trying to specifically focus on these types of crypto and digital assets. So think of them as an innovative, specialist ETF manager that just tries to focus on one specific niche, and that's it. The team is led by Dan, who used to work at Beta Shares previously, and then before that, he used to work at iShares, which is BlackRock. So he has plenty of experience in this whole asset management space. Now, currently, as this company stands, they've got two other funds, as you guys can see. First is the Bitcoin Wholesale Access Fund that is only available to large institutional investors. And then secondly, they've got the Cosmos Innovation Venture Fund. And this fund is all about DeFi. So I'm sure that as this new crypto space evolves, we will start to see more and more funds. Hopefully they have more funds in the pipeline that they're working towards. So interesting to see what they come up with next. So going back to the ETF, what does it actually track? Now, based on their investment objective, we can see that it is trying to track an index of global companies, and their primary focus is to invest in digital asset mining and infrastructure. So there's lots of hardware involved that allows mining to happen, as it can get very expensive. So having an ETF like this just allows you to get access very easily without you having to actually physically buy those assets, those hardware, those computers, which costs a lot of money. So as an investor, why would you want to buy this ETF in the first place? Now, basically the whole philosophy on this is the whole picks and shovels approach, which is the same approach that we saw in the ASX CRYP video from Beta Shares, right? Basically what they're saying is they're trying to get you to invest in the tools that allow crypto mining to happen in the first place, that can enable crypto to thrive in the future. It's basically the same philosophy as ASX CRYP, where you can invest in the companies that are trying to work in the crypto space and benefit from those companies, while the actual companies themselves do the work, but you can participate in the upside of those companies. So kind of like you're trying to enable those companies to do their work. And it's similar to the gold rush, where you would have heard where the people that made the most money were the people that were actually selling the tools, picks and shovels, to the miners so they could go out and mine. But the real money was made in selling those actual tools. So it's kind of like a similar approach to this ETF. So the types of companies that are included in this ETF include companies that are trying to solve those very complex math problems, companies like Hive Blockchain so they can mine Bitcoin, companies that try to provide blockchain infrastructure like Riot Blockchain and Galaxy as well. And then thirdly, companies that are trying to provide services and infrastructure for the Bitcoin blockchain specifically. So you've got Ebon and Can from the Nasdaq. So you can really see that this ETF is strictly focused on crypto. It's very tightly focused, and that is the main kind of selling point of this ETF, where you just get those companies. Now, just one thing I want to say is if we go back to the front page of this website, we can see that the AUM, or the assets under management, these are $2.3 million only, which is quite low for any ETF if you compare it to kind of other ETFs that are out there. But this ETF has only recently launched, so we should start to see this grow over time. Of course, this company is not as big as the other big dogs in the industry like Vanguard or Beta Shares. So yeah, you have to kind of take that into account as well. Looking at the NAV, that is 3.5, and daily return for today has been 5%. But the return since inception has been negative 29.11%, which is quite low. It's obviously not very good, but just keep in mind that it's only recently just launched. You've also got to take into account that this space is so volatile, so this sort of stuff is going to happen. A lot of the companies that are focused on mining these cryptocurrencies are actually quite positively correlated with the price of the underlying currency. So if Bitcoin was to increase by say 10%, usually we should see that these mining companies should also increase by about 7%. So there is about a 70% correlation on average to the actual coins. Now, if we compare this ETF to CRYP from BetaShares, we can see that the overall return for the ETF has been negative, almost 37%. So this ETF has had a recent fall too, and we can see that DIGA is quite positively correlated to this ETF. So just because DIGA has a negative return doesn't mean that it's a bad ETF. We've seen BetaShares hasn't done quite well either in this space, so just keep that in mind. Jumping into the performance more deeply, we can see the 1 month return is negative 21%. The inception return is again negative 29% as we talked about. And once again, inception date is the later end of October. So it's only really been a couple months since launch. And the actual index, if we look at the little fine print at the bottom, we can see that it was launched on 16th July 2021. So the actual index hasn't even been a year since it's been launched. So just keep that in mind. There's not too much data. When we look at ETFs like this or any ETF that has recently launched, usually we can see that the index has been around for quite a number of years. So we can kind of benchmark it and see what the historical returns have been like. But with this one, we can't even do that since the index hasn't even been around for a year. Now, the fund profile is pretty interesting. Just jumping into the fees, we've got management fees at 0.9%, which is about $90 per $10,000 invested, which is on the pricier end for sure. I haven't seen a more expensive ETF. If we compare it to other comparables like FTEC or CRYP, CRYP is charging about 0.75%, I believe, and FTEC is charging around 0.69%. But just keep in mind that FTEC is not a direct competitor. FTEC is more diversified. It's more focused on, the fintech side of things as well as blockchain. So it's not just blockchains, but still the fees are quite expensive. You're paying almost 1% for these people to, manage your money and track the index. So yeah, that is where I have an issue where it is on the pricier side. Now, yes, we can say that this is a very high growth space. So over the long term, hopefully the returns will be enough to offset the fees by a huge amount, but we don't know that for sure, and it is a big risk, especially if you compare it to the other competitors that we just had a look at. Jumping into the holdings for DIGA, this is again pretty interesting because you can see that the top 4 companies make up almost 55% of the portfolio. So if you're looking to invest in this ETF, I would highly recommend that you actually research the top 4 or top 5 companies just to see what they're all about, because majority of your money is going to be invested across these companies, right? And overall, if we have a look at the holdings are only 17 in this whole ETF, right? If we compare that to BetaShares, once again, BetaShares has a holdings number of about 32, I believe. So it's almost half of CRYP. Your money is going to be quite concentrated across these companies. Now, this is a side-by-side comparison to CRYP, and we can see that the biggest 2 companies in CRYP, Coinbase and MicroStrategy, these 2 companies are nowhere to be found in the DIGA ETF because Coinbase is basically an exchange. They're not really focused on mining, therefore they are not included. Same with MicroStrategy. They own a lot of Bitcoin, billions and billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, but they're not focused on mining primarily, so therefore they're not included. But we do have some other overlap we can see with Marathon Digital, Riot Blockchain, and Galaxy Holdings, and Hut 8 as well. We can see that with Hut 8 Mining Group, in CRYP, the holdings percentage is about 3.1%. But if we look at DIGA, we can see that the percentage is increased almost 3 times to 10%, right? Which means that there's a bigger focus on Hut 8. And the reason being is because Hut 8 is really focused on digital mining. Therefore, in this ETF with DIGA, they have given a higher allocation towards it. So basically with DIGA, this is a more concentrated version almost of ASX CRYP. And if you got scared these past couple of months with the CRYP ETF, really falling, really just, going down very quickly, you're going to get similar results with ASX DIGA because since there are less companies, it is going to be more and more volatile. So, obviously keep your risk profile in mind. Only invest in this ETF what you're happy to, lose or not lose, but if you're happy to see that money, go down by 40, 50, 60%, you should be okay to invest in the ETF. If you are not able to stomach such huge losses, then it may be best to just leave this one out. So DIGA is listed on the CHIEX exchange, which means that not every single broker will have access to this ETF, but The main brokers will, like you can see, CommSec, NabTrade, ANZ, and Westpac, all the big banks have access to CRYP ETF, so you should be able to access them if you're using these platforms. You've also got SelfWealth and Stake, which has newly come in. So if you are looking to get started with SelfWealth or Stake, there's a link in description. They do have some of the cheapest fees on the ASX market when it comes to brokerage. Link in description if you want to go check it out. Now, my overall thoughts on this ETF is the fact that this is definitely a very specialist ETF that is solely focused on crypto mining, as the name obviously suggests. It does have half the holdings of CRYP, therefore it is going to be more volatile. And due to the actual nature of this industry, it is generally going to be very volatile. So if you are looking to invest in this ETF, just keep that in mind. You do want to have your risk profile looked at and you have to assess that situation. Now, at this point, if I was going to choose between CRYP or DIGA, I would probably choose CRYP. And the reason being is because it does give you a much more wider exposure to crypto in general, not just the miners. And if I look at kind of where the world is heading, and if it is my belief that the blockchain in general is going to grow and crypto is going to grow, then it seems to be a much better bet to just focus on the overall, companies that operate in the crypto space, rather than just focusing on the miners in general, right? That's just my kind of way of thinking. I may be wrong, and just keep in mind that my, opinions or whatever is always subject to change. This video was definitely not financial advice, but I'm very keen to see, what you think about this ETF. If you enjoyed this video, check out these two videos right here. This is the CRYP ETF from BetaShares, which we spoke about quite a lot in this video. And this is the FTEC video from ETF Securities. Check these two videos out, as these two are comparables. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. How to pronounce CRYP?